On June 6, 1944, after years of grueling conflict, the first Allies to land on Omaha Beach in occupied France were immediately met with stiff opposition from German defenders. Central to this conflict was Heinrich Hein Severloh, stationed at WN-62, a key defensive position among the German fortifications along this vital beachfront. Armed with the MG-42, renowned for its rapid-fire capabilities, Severloh tirelessly engaged the advancing American forces. Severloh's precision was merciless as he targeted the Americans disembarking from their landing crafts, and entire platoons were cut down within moments of exposure. Countless GIs caught knee-deep in the surf struggled under the weight of their gear and the unyielding fire, and some attempted to evade the direct assault by leaping from the sides, only to meet the same fate. After 6 relentless hours of gunfire, and with his comrades beginning to withdraw and regroup, Private Severloh emerged as the sole survivor in his fortified position, single-handedly holding off the enemy. In the face of overwhelming odds and dwindling ammunition, having expended nearly 13,000 rounds, Severloh confronted a chilling realization. In the grim aftermath of the day's events, he had become the Beast of Omaha. The Allied troops were about to launch Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy, France, to begin the liberation of Europe. Hundreds of ships were approaching northern France. Hitler had built the monumental Atlantic Wall to deal with the invasion, but it was not enough to fend off the upcoming odds. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had tried his best to fortify the defenses in France, but manpower ran short, just like ammunition and heavy weaponry. Private Heinrich Hein Severloh was one of the many troops tasked with defending the Omaha Beach sector from the approaching enemy forces, under orders of his lieutenant Bernhard Fricking. In the past months, both men had developed a true friendship. Both had served on the Eastern Front against the hordes of communists and survived to tell the tale. Their units were tasked with defending one of the 15 strongpoints guarding Omaha. WN-62, or Widerstandsneste Resistance Nest 62, was the strongest. It was over 330 square meters and featured an excellent field of view of the entire beach. The heavily fortified position was armed with 2 75mm cannons, 2 50mm anti-tank guns, several mortars, and plenty of machine guns, including MG-34s and MG-42s. WN-62 was set up like a clock. Each machine gun position was centered to provide the maximum area of effect across its field of view. Severloh's position was at the center of the action, and he manned the most effective machine gun of World War II, the MG-42, nicknamed the Knochensäge, or bone saw, by the Germans. The powerful machine gun had an impressive rate of fire of around 1,200 rounds a minute, with excellent accuracy, at ranges of up to 3,000 meters. The imposing 7.92mm cartridge had incredible stopping power and came in 50 to 250 round belts. Hein's MG-42 was a beast to behold and could decimate several enemy platoons within seconds. The sun was going down, and the surrounding German troops in the French countryside were about to prepare supper before a good night's sleep when one of the alerts abruptly interrupted them. They thought it was another notification from the top brass, except this time it was the real thing. The soldiers slowly got up and prepared their gear to approach their designated positions. Private Severloh and First Lieutenant Fricking did the same, grabbing their kit, food, ammunition, and other supplies before moving out to their resistance nest overlooking Omaha Beach. The tired soldiers packed their gear aboard horse carts and carried on with the mission. It would be a long night, with little to no rest. Private Severloh and Lieutenant Fricking arrived at WN-62 at around 1 in the morning. During the travel, both men fell asleep to the leisurely pace of the horses and the surrounding environment. As soon as they unpacked their gear, the German soldiers paid attention to the silence of the night and noticed the distant roar of large aircraft motors, probably bombers or cargo aircraft. The night reigned supreme, and none of the troopers could see anything in the darkness. That did not take away from the rising tension the soldiers felt. Something was cooking up behind the cover of darkness, and whatever it was, Severloh, Fricking, and the rest of his Kameraden were caught in the middle of it. Once inside their perimeter, a Panzer Grenadier from Regiment 726 began barricading the entrance with barbed wire and mines. Severloh went to his machine gun nest, inspected the available supplies, and grabbed his MG-42 for a quick look. The lethal Knochensäge was in excellent condition and ready to rid the coast of any enemy who dared set foot on it with superb accuracy and rate of fire. Private Severloh glanced at the beach, saw nothing, and climbed out of his nest after reloading the imposing machine gun. Once in the open, The private looked back at the beach and was bewildered by what he saw. At first, he thought it was an illusion, but it was not. Severloh had sighted the silhouettes of 6 ships on the horizon. He froze for a moment and immediately called for Lieutenant Frerking. When he arrived with another lieutenant, the ships were all gone. Like ghosts, they had vanished without a trace. Nonetheless, Severloh insisted that their commanding officer be notified. The enemy was nearby. Lieutenant Frerking contacted the naval artillery strongpoint at Port-au-Bassin. Minutes later, the artillerymen fired 2 green and 2 red flares to determine whether the vessels sighted were friendly. They were not, and no reply was made. Severloh stretched Frerking's hand before returning to his post, where he rechecked his MG-42 before going to sleep. At around 5 a.m. on June 6, 1944, the morning welcomed Severloh and the German defenders with a view they would not forget for the rest of their lives. The horizon revealed a line of enemy battleships that knew no end. The vast ocean was filled with vessels of all shapes and sizes. It was a threatening sight that left the garrison hopeless. There was no way the Wehrmacht could face such incredible odds and triumph. Severloh took a deep breath, briefly closed his eyes, and went for his machine gun. Things were about to get ugly. WN-62 was the best positioned and most heavily armed of the 15 strongpoints surrounding Omaha Beach. Their MG-42 and 34 machine guns were ready to strike down the enemy as soon as they arrived on the beach. Severloh and Frerking were battle-ready. Their hearts pounding, the seasoned warriors braced for the impact of the imminent American bombardments. The soldiers of the 726th Grenadier Regiment were also ready, but some rookies were consumed by panic after seeing the enemy ships and hearing the roar of hundreds of hostile bombers. When the poor weather dissipated and the skies became more transparent, hell broke loose. With the first lights, over 34,000 U.S. Army troops were eager to land on the beach and take the fight to the enemy. Soon, the bombers of the U.S. Army 8th Air Force appeared overhead, unleashing their devastating arsenal of bombs to destroy the German artillery, machine gun fortifications, and beach defenses. Hein and the rest of the defenders immediately dove for cover. The hellish sound of the bombs echoed across the perimeter. Despite hearing and feeling the massive impact of the high explosives, none of the bombs damaged the gun positions or the obstacles. It appeared that the weather was not as clear as the Americans expected. However, the understrength German defenders were far from being safe. Following the bombing strikes, the Allied warships opened fire with all the might of their naval guns. The sheer firepower and the overwhelming number of enemy troops meant only one thing for Hein Severloh and the Germans. They would fight like lions to survive the long day ahead. The entrenched Germans sighted the first Allied landing craft at around 6:30 a.m. All the men aboard belonged to the legendary U.S. Army 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. The Amis, as the Germans called their enemy, were bound to drop their ramps and leave the soldiers within the sector in front of Severloh and WN-62, which the Allied troops designated Easy Red. Severloh kept his finger in the bone saw's trigger, ready to pull it as soon as he was ordered to. He aimed at the first group of GIs disembarking. Still, he waited until they were knee-deep in the water to make them easy targets. Once the shooting began, the Americans would have a hard time rushing for cover if they were in the water. Those who made it would still have to run across plain terrain to find the German obstacles set to stop the landing craft and use them for cover. Nonetheless, to Private Severloh's dismay, one of the MG-34s below him was experiencing mechanical problems, leaving him and his devastating MG-42 to defend the sector by himself. The Amis disembarked swiftly, determinedly keeping their M1 Garens out of the water to prevent failures. They slowly approached the shore. It was only the tide and them, or so they thought. More landing craft began to arrive, delivering over 30 men each in the blink of an eye. Severloh's sector was almost plagued with American GIs advancing, trying their best to make it out of the water as soon as possible. It was now or never. Hein aimed at the beach and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Swift bursts of his MG-42 were more than enough to decimate an entire platoon reaching the shore. He then aimed toward a landing craft, lowering its ramp, and made quick work of the men trying to make it out. None survived. 30 souls lost in mere seconds. Severloh would later write in his book, WN-62, A German Soldier's Memories of the Defense of Omaha Beach, quote, "I saw how the water sprayed up where my machine gun bursts landed, and when the small fountains came closer to the GIs, they threw themselves down. In a short time, all the Americans down there were shot." Wave after wave of American troops followed, consisting of about 10 to 15 landing craft in private Hein sector and about 50 across Omaha Beach, each carrying 30 men. Severloh cooled or swapped the barrel of his MG-42 between waves, always ensuring a fresh supply of ammunition for the upcoming enemies. Hein employed his standard-issue Kar 98K bolt-action rifle when not using his bone saw. The German would fire over 400 rounds from his rifle before the end of the day. Hein would be haunted for the rest of his life by the image of an American GI rushing for cover. The man dropped his flamethrower and sought shelter behind 2 concrete blocks, only to be hit straight in the head by Severloh's accurate rifle. The GI's helmet rolled into the sand. However, Severloh did not rest, as another of the machine guns was knocked out, leaving him as the sole defender of WN-62. Soon, the Americans tried to avoid his lethal machine gun bursts by jumping from the sides of the landing craft before the ramp was down. But it was not enough for them to make it out. The rifle fire of nearby Germans caught them. Lieutenant Ferking was also under pressure, identifying targets, setting coordinates, and relaying messages for German batteries. At around 2 p.m., Hein saw the first American Sherman tanks approaching from the west. He had already expended his 12,000 rounds of ammunition and had taken over 2,000 lives before being forced to employ tracer rounds to continue keeping the Americans at bay. This highlighted his position, leading the Amis to target Hein's position immediately. A shell soon made its way to the fortified bunker, injuring Severloh in the face, but he kept firing restlessly. At 3 p.m., Lieutenant Ferking appeared and ordered him to abandon his position after 9 long hours of continuous combat. The Americans had already overrun their positions. Thus, the survivors began making way for the town of Colville. Severloh reached the area successfully, but Lieutenant Ferking, who stayed behind to rally the survivors, did not. He was caught in the crossfire with American troops on the outskirts of the French town. Tired, overwhelmed, and surrounded, Severloh and the survivors surrendered the following morning, putting an end to his military career. After spending some time as a prisoner of war in the US and UK, Heinrich Severloh returned to the fatherland in 1947. He lived an everyday life, reuniting with veterans from both sides in the following decades, and writing his wartime experiences in his 2002 book, WN-62. Severloh passed away in 2006, but his legacy and the place where he earned the nickname the Beast of Omaha can still be seen today. The remains of WN-62 are located east of the American Normandy Cemetery and Memorial.